Welcome. I'm going to call to order our meeting today. This is a meeting of the Housing Policy and Development Committee. I'm Chair of the committee, Cam Gordon, and I'm joined today by Councilmember Reich, Schrader, our Vice Chair, Ellison, Bender, and Goodman. We have 3 items on our agenda today, and we're going to take the second item first because it's a consent item, and then we have a public hearing on a land sale that I expect won't take very long, and then a discussion item on our Stable Homes, Stable Schools program. So first on the consent item, and I'm happy to pull this off if any committee members have questions, but this is authorizing the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency Lender Participation Agreement for Minnesota Housing Home Improvement Loan Programs. Are there any questions or comments on that item? I will move that then, and all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That motion carries then. Now we'll move on to our first item, which is the land sale. This is for a side yard at 232 Humboldt Avenue North to Daniel Paul Ofstedal, if I'm saying that right. And I think we'll get a brief staff report.
Good afternoon, Chair Gordon and members of the committee. I'm Beth Grossen, Senior Project Coordinator, and I'm in the Business Development section of CPED. On December 5th, 2003, the city acquired 232 Humboldt Avenue North as part of a broader package of land from scrap metal processors for the Van Wyck Memorial Boulevard construction project. This small lot of about 3,000 square feet was not needed for the Van Wyck project and has sat vacant. I work in the business development section of CPED and come to you because I manage this property as part of a portfolio of largely commercial properties in North Minneapolis. Staff is recommending sale of this lot as a side yard. The owner of several adjacent residential properties, Dan Ofstedal, wants to acquire the lot to make an existing duplex that he owns compliant with city regulations related to parcel size. Staff recommends the sale of 232 Humboldt to Daniel Ofstedal for its appraised value of $1,200, subject to conditions. Staff evaluated the purchaser based on the side yard program criteria, including verification that the purchaser's property taxes are current and that the purchaser's property maintenance complies with the building code and zoning ordinance. To evaluate responsibility, staff consulted with the Department of Reg Services staff to verify the status of vacant buildings, rental properties, and any other properties owned by the proposed purchaser within the city of Minneapolis. There were no concerns. The purchaser will combine the unbuildable vacant land with their adjacent parcel at 236 Humboldt, which is approximately 3,022 square feet for a combined parcel of approximately 6,138 square feet. Notification was provided to the Harrison Neighborhood Association on December 19th, 2018. Longer term, Dan Ofstedal would like to work with the city to develop an apartment building on a large assembled parcel that includes several of his contiguous properties. He's agreed to place a restrictive covenant on the 232 Humboldt property, prohibiting construction of a single-family house, nor using it as a parking lot. Dan Ofstedal is here today, available to address any questions you may have. Do you have any questions of me?
Yes, I think we may. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, since Mr. Osterdahl owns a lot of property and has for a long period of time, what's prevented any of this expected multifamily development?
Well, in the past, this area was really zoned only for duplex or two-family housing, and it's now with the new comp plan and the Botno Station area plan for Van Wyck that the vision really is for higher density development in this area.
Okay, thanks.
I don't see any other questions, and thank you very much for your report. I will now open the public hearing. Is there anybody here who wishes to speak on this matter? You're welcome to address us if you'd like to. Seeing no one then, I'll move this forward. Oh, Councilmember Goodman, did you have another? Okay. I'll move this forward for approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That motion carries. And now we'll move on to our third item, which is a report and update on our Stable Homes and Stable Schools program. And we're going to have Ms. Topinka give that report. And there's a few items under this. We're receiving and filing the report. We're approving a work plan, and we're also, I'm not trying to predict the future, but we will be considering these things and considering authorizing a funding agreement with Minneapolis Public Housing Authority. Welcome.
All right. Thank you, Chair Gordon, committee members. I'm Katie Topinka, Housing Policy Coordinator at CPED, and here today with several of the partners for the Stable Homes, Stable Schools program to give you an update, which is in response to a staff direction that was part of the budget approved in December. So just as a reminder, the Stable Homes, Stable Schools program is a new initiative that was approved in the 2019 budget. It's a partnership with a number of organizations, some of which you will hear from today. Through the program, families with children who are experiencing homelessness will be eligible to receive rental assistance, which is funded together between the city and Minneapolis Public Housing Authority. We expect to support up to 320 families over 3 years with the initiative. And to be eligible, families must have children attending one of 15 MPS schools, and MPS will share more about that in a moment. The program is really a unique partnership among these partners that gives us new tools to reach some of the lowest income families in our community, those earning 30% of AMI or less. And the goals of the program are really to create housing stability for families, and then also to improve educational outcomes and stability in Minneapolis public schools. And there are a number of partners that are engaged in this program beyond the city. There's Minneapolis Public Housing Authority, and you'll hear from them shortly, Minneapolis Public Schools, Hennepin County Health and Human Services, who will also be presenting here today. And then the Pohlad Family Foundation has committed $500,000 to this effort, which will be used to fund homelessness prevention services. And there is someone from Pohlad here today. And then we are also in discussions with the University of Minnesota on the evaluation component of this program, and I'll share a little bit more about that toward the end. And then finally, we've also been talking with the Minnesota Multi-Housing Association, and a few of their members or representatives are here today, and talking about partnering with their members to set aside units for families who will be participating in this program. So that's really a critical part, the landlord engagement piece of making this program a success. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan Strack from Minneapolis Public Schools to talk more about their role in this program.
Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. Again, my name is Ryan Strack with Minneapolis Public Schools. Thank you for the opportunity to briefly share some background and context. I know some of this information you've heard before, as well as MPS's role in Stable Homes, Stable Schools. As many of you are aware, housing instability and homelessness has been a persistent negative influence on public education in Minneapolis for decades. While recent progress has been made, still more than 3,000 MPS enrolled students, plus thousands more preschool-aged children, experience homelessness in our city every year. A long-standing research partnership with the University of Minnesota has revealed that even a single episode of homelessness can substantially impact a student's learning for years. And while we continue to offer every service we can as a school district, for our students and families, we simply lack the ability to address the underlying core issue of housing instability on our own. In addition to the impact homelessness has on individual students, its prevalence within a school also matters. A greater level of student homelessness is linked to higher student, classroom, and school turnover and mobility. It was through this lens the 15 participating schools were chosen. These schools, shown on the slide, had the highest concentrations of homelessness, some in excess of 20% during the course of the 2016-17 school year. MPS would again like to thank the mayor and the council for including this investment in your budget. Our role moving forward will focus on identification, screening, and referral of families to the program, and then the ongoing support and coordination with the service provider and the family on the educational pieces, parent involvement in their children's education. And I'll turn it over now to Hennepin County Representative. I'm sorry, Public Housing Authority Representative.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Gordon, council members. My name is Kyle Hansen. I'm the director of the HCV Section 8 program for Minneapolis Public Housing Authority. I'd like to take just a few moments to talk about the program flow and the way we envision this program working. You have been provided already with a copy of our draft manual for the program. We've been working together as a group over the last several months to develop the policies and procedures that we will follow. We modeled the program very closely after a very successful program that the Tacoma Housing Authority in Washington ran on a smaller scale in partnership with the city of Tacoma. So the manual is modeled after that. MPHA's role in the process is really to work with the families once they have been identified by the school and referred over by the school social worker. We will have dedicated staff for both the POLAD funds and for the City of Minneapolis funds who will work directly with these families on the initial intake. So we will have a dedicated and coordinated intake system for them and a streamlined process that will expedite paperwork and streamline inspections for this particular program. We will also be working very closely with the social service entity. We have an RFP that is ready to go out to take proposals to identify a social service entity for this program. That entity will then work with the families to identify housing, housing navigation and search. They will also help to address any barriers that the families may have to housing. If those are income related, they will search for assistance. If they are employment related, they will help link to education and job training for longer term success. They will also work on UD expungement or any other type of barriers that the family may be facing to get them into housing. We have had great interest from property owners in this program because of the focus on children, and our representatives from the Multi-Housing Association are here today as well, and they have shown interest in working with us. They have several owners who have stepped forward and said they would love to participate in the program. So we're looking forward to expanding housing options for low-income folks within the city, and are hopeful that some new units will be brought to the table that may not be currently available to families. I want to stress also how unique this program is, to bring all of these entities together and to work out agreements in a relatively quick time frame. But we have a lot of interest throughout the country. The Coalition for Large Public Housing Authorities has already expressed interest and is watching the program. We have received several phone calls from other cities wanting to know about the process, and so people are going to be watching, and we think that it is a model that can be replicated in other places. The other unique piece of this program is that the service component we feel is the most important. These are services that are over and above what families would normally receive. They are intensive services at the beginning and meant to really help in a very tight housing market, help locate and stabilize that family in what is a very tough market to find housing in. And then the job isn't done once the housing is found and located for the family. We follow the families, and we'll be checking up with them, making sure that things are going okay, and identifying ways for future growth and upward mobility for the families. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I'll turn
Could
it
I,
over to Hennepin
I
County.
just
Yes.
ask a question?
Absolutely.
And there may be other questions too. You talked about the service component and how important it will be. Who will be providing those services? And can you talk a little bit more about what those services would be?
Yes. So we currently have an RFP that is in final editing form. So we have not chosen that partner yet. We will be going through a competitive process for that and receiving applications, and then we will have a committee that will review that. So the partner has not been chosen. Their main responsibilities are to be a navigator for the family, to first and foremost help connect them with properties within the city that have availability, working with property owners, working with the Multi-Housing Association, working with MPHA staff who work with owners to identify vacant units within the city that fall within the zones of the school. So housing identification, but then also going with the family to look at the unit, be there as support for the family through that process of getting a lease signed, making sure that the family understands all of the obligations for the lease, and again, taking care of any barriers that may be preventing them, if that's a UD expungement or payment of past due utility bills or other types of things, helping identify funds that would be available to help the families through that process. And then finally, once the family is housed, helping to identify what are the needs the family has, whether that's educational links for the adults in the family, whether that's after-school programming or care of the children. It's really meant to be a navigator type of service where they're linked in with Hennepin County systems to make sure that the people are receiving benefits that that are available to them, and really meant to follow the family through. So it's over and above support for the family, and we feel that that's one of the unique designs around this that encourages property owners to step forward with units because they know that there'll be the additional supports there for the family, but also to really follow that family through this period of time.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the program Flowchart. I'm interested in if you could tell me in each point on this, what happens now?
Mm-hmm.
Just so we can get a sense of it. Because, I mean, if you're sitting up here, you're thinking to yourself, well, this is like $4.5 million for 100 families. That's $400,000 per family. What could they possibly be spending the money on? And so it sounds like it's really staff intensive. It's not as much housing support. So can you go through, if there's a family in crisis right now, we don't ignore them, so what happens?
Right. So first of all, the major piece of the funds from the city is going for direct housing support. So the major portion of the money is going for housing support.
Where in this box is that? Rental assistance?
That's the rental assistance.
Why
yeah.
isn't the county providing rental assistance currently? That's what they do, rental assistance. Why isn't that coming out of
The Public Housing Authority?
I'm pretty sure the county provides rental assistance currently. Why aren't they providing rental assistance currently for families with children experiencing homelessness?
Okay. Someone from the county, Casey, maybe you could answer for that.
I'll yield.
Sure. Okay.
And thank you, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Goodwin. Just to maybe follow up, we keep hearing at the city that there are millions of dollars of unspent rental assistance funds every year, and so I think that's part of the question. So we have allocated $9 million. It's a significant amount of money for the city in a space where we hear not only that there are county resources, but that the exact same amount of money that we've allocated annually is going unspent. And I think we're excited about the partnership, but just wanting to make sure that we're leveraging the different levels of government's funding in a way that makes sense, that's sustainable, that we can really justify to our constituents. So I think that's kind of the origin of the question. We've heard so many times over the past number of years, couple of years, 3 years, that the county isn't fully spending its emergency rental assistance funds. So when we see a box that says $9 million of city funding is going to that, it raises the question.
Chair Gordon and committee members, I haven't had a chance to introduce myself, but my name is Casey Schleisman, and I work with Hennepin County's Housing Stability Area. I primarily do planning for youth and families at risk of or currently experiencing homelessness in Hennepin County. Appreciate the questions and the context, and I'll do my best to give a straightforward answer. So what I will say in regard to the economic assistance and the economic general assistance, which is EA or EGA, that is available for families and single adults that are experiencing homelessness and are facing other barriers. It is generally speaking one-time or very short-term assistance for those families and single adults, so not similar to the funding that would be used for these same families, which is much more ongoing and long-term. In addition to the underspending of both of those funds historically, my understanding is that economic assistance has, for the past few years, has been drawn down on a regular basis. In regard to economic general assistance, which is actually for single adults, my understanding is that it has gone unspent, but there have been a lot of changes that have been made that have rectified this over the past 2 years specifically, where we are no longer leaving money on the table essentially in either of those buckets. They are being spent to serve and best serve single adults and families that are in need. But as I mentioned, they are more focused on that short-term assistance, whereas this housing stability funds is much more focused on the longer term stability and ongoing rental assistance.
Could you just define what short-term means?
So generally speaking, and David Hewitt I would like to invite up if he has something to add from Hennepin County, is 1 month of rent and or security deposit, so very short term, whereas we're looking at rental assistance for up to 3 years for some of these families, so that just looks very different.
Could somebody in this program be eligible to receive that assistance for the first month from the county, and then so there could be a partnership opportunity there, or maybe the deposit will help and then the city will take over then?
Yep. No, I think that if a family would be eligible for those funds, they would be able to draw down and use them. As you know, there's very specific eligibility that a family needs to meet, or a single adult, to be able to draw down those funds or receive them. And so it would all depend upon the circumstances and living situation of the family and what their current needs and barriers are, and if they fit those eligibility requirements.
And the navigator would help them figure that out.
Correct.
And access those. Okay.
Yep, that I would say that's a primary function of these navigators, is helping families to really understand the various resources that are available, not available to them, advocate for them to be better. And in addition, I do want to address, the Hennepin County funds that you mentioned. Hennepin County does currently invest approximately $7 million in prevention and housing resources for homeless families in Hennepin County, in addition to a little over $5 million that we invest in our Hennepin County family shelter system. And so collectively, there is a large percentage and amount going in to serve homeless families. In addition to this, I think our real role from Hennepin County's perspective is to ensure that these families have access to those resources, and that we're coordinating things whenever possible to best serve those families.
Yes, go ahead.
So I want to make sure I understand this. So the total amount of money going to help homeless families from Hennepin County right now is $5 million?
Councilmember Goodman, $5 million, a little over $5 million for our Hennepin County funded shelters. And then we also have approximately $7 million that goes to support prevention and housing resources for families.
So the total amount going to support shelters is only $5 million?
Family shelters.
Yeah, no wonder there's a problem. We're giving you $9 million over 3 years, and we're like half your size. And so this is, I just want people to understand the scope of the amount of money going into this. It's huge from the city, and the county is double our size, if not more, and we're putting in more, basically, per capita than you guys spend on the whole shelter system per year.
I do want to mention too.
That can't be right that it's only $5 million.
For the family shelters, but I wanted to, that doesn't include the EA and the EGA?
Correct.
So
the $5 million does not include EA or EGA.
How much is in EA and EGA?
I would need to ask internally about that specific amount to get you a response, unless David is aware of that. Yeah, so I would have to go back internally to answer that question for you. I do want to also acknowledge the fact that Hennepin County's role has been primarily that of system guidance and really truly identifying the gaps in our system. And one of the biggest gaps that we see for families experiencing homelessness is those families that are currently unsafely doubled up or couch hopping that otherwise may not have access to our county funded family shelter system. And this program is very intentional to really fill those gaps and to work with the identified families that perhaps otherwise are not being served, which I'm really excited about, because when we look at the system as a whole, we always want to be filling the gaps that currently exist, and that is one that is very evident to us.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Huff, maybe someone higher up can answer this question. Why is the city involved in this at all if the only differential is that they're kids in our public school system? This is what the county does. Families who are experiencing homelessness who live in Hennepin County. So why is the city even putting in this money? Why isn't the county solving this problem based on its much larger budget? We've already taken over $1.5 million for the Hiawatha homeless encampment. I'm just interested in why the larger budget, those kids live in Hennepin County too.
That could be more of a rhetorical question.
No, it's
I'm
not.
sure, and I know that
Why,
this,
if this was such a good idea, why isn't the county doing it? Why did you need us to put in $9 million?
Councilmember Goodman, I think that my response is that needs to be a true partnership to address this problem. We have to come at this from city, county, schools, as well as public housing authority. And the real big goal, in my opinion, is we do have a lot of different services that are available to these families, and we need to be very clear in connecting families to the Hennepin County resources that currently exist and are able to serve them. And that is our primary role.
Okay, so I'm looking at the budget and it doesn't have a penny from the county. So there must be a bunch of money from the county that's going into the budget that's not in the handout we just got.
Councilmember Goodman, I think that's a very good point. I think if we did like a total budget that showed how much money is being invested to serve families experiencing homelessness in Hennepin County would absolutely have a line item in that, and that budget may look very different. This is very specific to this target population and these dollars.
So it's kind of like the county is saying this population, only the city should deal with that because we're doing other things. But that is your mission. It would be like us asking you to police Minneapolis too. But I'm just wondering, I would love to see the larger budget, but I mean, you handed us a budget and we're the only ones paying for it other than POLAD and public housing. So if the county was a partner, wouldn't you have money line itemed in this budget?
perhaps that'll be something we can get in the evaluation as well when we find out how many of the families actually took advantage of some of the county resources, even the ones that we heard about today. And I certainly understand this debate, and I think I agree with my colleague to my left there that it would be great if the county would step up and participate in this. Maybe we'll prove this pilot works so well you'll take it over. I'll just note that the county didn't actually come up with this idea and wasn't asking the city to do this. We're responding to a proposal from the mayor that went through our budget process. But and I would note that chances are, I don't have a quote right here, but I think in our charter it probably mentions that one of our main goals is to provide for the welfare of the residents of our city, and these children and their parents are certainly residents of the city, and so I think we share in the missions of our organizations to play a role in doing this kind of thing. I have Councilmember Ellison has a question, so go ahead.
Thank you. And I had an opportunity to give a brief by our staff, and I'd say that if I have some concerns with the program, and if any of them were sort of eased, it was definitely seeing the diligence and sort of the I think the passion that staff have with regard to engaging in this program. So I think a little bit of me is slightly at ease to have had that briefing, and I want to thank staff for that. One of the things that I am concerned about, though, is that this is a lot of money, and while that's not inherently a problem, I think that we need to invest in solutions that work. It's my understanding that, and this came up during our briefing, that this is a program, or a similar program like this has been attempted in the past. And I just wanted to get a little bit more information if anybody's got some institutional knowledge on that. But the overview is that this has been a program that was attempted in the past and ran out of money, right? And wasn't continued. We've got 3 years on the table with this program. Ward 5 has the most schools in this program. And I guess my fear is that we could create a program that constituents come to rely on, that is valuable to the people who participate, and then in 3 years, we're pulling the rug out from under people? And is there somewhere where $9 million could go deeper, right? That could go further to securing the stability of my constituents? That's sort of like a question, right? And so anyway, just wanted to maybe get a little bit of, if anybody has any institutional knowledge on the program that was tried prior, give us an overview of that, and why what are the plans to make sure that this program doesn't go the way of that program?
Great. Chair Gordon, Councilmember Ellison. So the program I believe you're referring to was called It's All About the Kids. And the It's All About the Kids program was a partnership between the City of Minneapolis and the Public Housing Authority. It did provide very similar direct rental assistance. The scale was much smaller. I believe it was in the 10 to 15 family range. It was before my time at the Housing Authority, but
Do you know what years?
I don't, but I could find out for you. So, and my understanding is that the city decided that it was not going to fund the program any longer, and the service partners, I believe we were working with Lutheran Social Services at that time, were also unable to continue. What I feel is different about this program, number one, is the scale and the ability that we have to study the results. So working with the University of Minnesota and the researchers, we're going to have some pretty good statistics on how our families have been served by this. And if the pilot works and shows the success that we think it will, our hope is that it will attract other philanthropic support. We already have a Polad Family Foundation at the table, and we are hopeful that other entities will be attracted to this and say that they could take over part of the city's responsibility for that, or part of the other support. So we're going to be looking for other dollars. We already have other interests coming in saying, we'd like to donate beds for all the kids in the program. We would like to donate dental care for all the kids in the program. So it's attracting a lot of attention across the city from private entities as well. And I think that it's a really good opportunity for us to show how we can partner together, get out of our silos a little bit. And I want to stress, too, that we have depended a great deal on Hennepin County through the formation of the program, because their wheelhouse is the service model. So they have really helped us in developing the program parameters, setting up the guidelines for the program, and really been there to support us through developing the RFP for services. The service provider will also have access and direct link into the Hennepin County systems, so they will be able to navigate what benefits the family is able to apply for, what is a good fit for the families, and what other programs Hennepin County offers that they can tap into. So really this navigator is used as a way to connect them with more permanent Hennepin County supports that is in an over and above manner. But you had just a couple questions on the program flow, so I wanted to make sure that I answered those. The intake happens right here. And at the MPHA, we identify the housing for the family, get them through that lease process, and then set them up with the supportive services. So the dollars will flow through our entity. We have already that capacity to pay landlords. It goes direct deposit into their bank accounts. And then for the POLAD funds, if those families are identified and sent to us, we will work on processing payment to wherever the funds may need to go for the POLAD money for the prevention piece.
Thank you. And we're joined by Councilman Cunningham, and he has a question as well.
Thank you so much. More of a comment. Thank you for having me, my colleagues. I think that I first just want to say I think that the jurisdictional responsibility as well as the program sustainability are very valid concerns that I have also carried as well. One of the things is that as a former teacher and working in public schools, I have reached out to the mayor saying that I would like to work on this, being part of the team. And so I just want to say programmatically that this is a good program, and I'm impressed with the way that it's been put together and developed. I've done the research before even approving the $3.35 million. I wanted to make sure that this was a right investment because we had conversations about us stepping into this space as a city, and but the research really shows that the support not only helps the kids themselves, but the families, the parents start to actually make more money. That was one of the consistent outcomes of this program, was that there were some parents that were making $0 per month income, and then by the end they were making like $1,700. Like there were significant growths in family monthly income. So that was something that kind of surprised me because I had assumed it would be very much so focused on the child's academic performance and health. But what really was another positive impact was the amount of income, not just because they were saving money on rent, but because they were actually generating more money. So I thought that was a really great outcome. The kids' behaviors, attendance, performance in school, they all improved. Of course, it's not like, because it takes time, but there were some really positive results that came out of the Tacoma pilot that happened. So I am very also interested in continuing the conversations about jurisdictional responsibility as well as the long-term programmatic sustainability, but I just wanted to speak to the merits of the program itself, from my professional opinion, that I think that this is a very strong program and that it has a lot of potential to address needs ultimately.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you, and thanks for being here today. To be clear, there's no concern about the program design or the way it's been put together in any way, shape, or form, and there's clearly no concern about helping homeless families and children stay in school. This is a question of who should be doing this work, and should the city be in the business of providing ongoing rental assistance? Because what Councilmember Ellison summed it up. This is like signing the city up for $3 million a year for the rest of our lives, because we won't be in a position to throw people off this assistance. And so we don't fund this. This is not what we do. We build permanent, supportive, and affordable housing, and every penny that goes into this does not provide money for that purpose, and that's our wheelhouse. And it's one thing if the federal government is not doing what they're doing, but it's almost like the county's not doing what they should be doing, and public housing should be stepping up and providing additional rental assistance to this population. So yes, of course, you guys are all happy because we're funding what you guys should be funding. And that is my concern. We'll never get out of it. We got to, in some ways, not say we're going to be the be-all, end-all for every program that every other level of unit government doesn't want to solve. And so far, our pattern has been, yep, we'll jump into this space. And jumping into the space means less money for the things that are in our space. That's what this committee is about, is partnering with those who build and maintain supportive and affordable housing, and every penny we don't put into that allows other units of government not to, and takes away from our mission. It has nothing to do with whether or not this is important. I, of course, agree this is important. I'm somewhat surprised to hear that something like this doesn't happen now, although I bet it does. I bet the schools, these poor people in the schools are like scrambling. They're scrambling to keep up their population, so I don't need to get into that. I feel horrible for the people at the school system. But this homelessness is the county's thing. And I'm not sure what's happened over at the county that we're now basically paying for shelter for people at the Hiawatha encampment, and now we're getting into ongoing rental assistance. I'm sure someone else will be happy to explain that.
Chair Gordon, Councilmember Goodman, if I could just for one moment clarify that the PHA is putting up 40% of the funds for the direct housing subsidy supports. And in the way that we are looking at this, it's really a way of leveraging our dollars to serve more people than we would be able to at the capacity that we're funded. So.
I appreciate that. I just wanted to make a note that it's all about the kids. Looks like the program started in 2001 and went all the way to 2004. And so at that time, we thought that belonged in the city wheelhouse in some way or another. Councilmember Ellison has another question. I know there's a few more slides and a few more people who might want to speak.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one of the concerns that I also have about this program is, if these families were going to be living in MPHA in public housing, I think that would sort of ease some concerns if this was going to go, if there was sort of a mix of, transitioning folks into like, I don't know, land trust home or something like that. I feel like that would ease some of my concerns. It does bother me a little bit that we've got, that the grant, that a large sum of this $9 million of public money is going to go into, is going to go towards enriching, private landlords, which nothing wrong with private landlords, but, and they are a big part of how we sustain affordable housing. But in this program, it feels like we already put a significant amount of public dollars towards subsidy to that purpose and that kind of thing. But it does worry me that, at the end of it, we're going to have spent $9 million, and I'm not really sure what we like, if that's just going to be used up and then the program ends, if somebody's going to come in to fill that space. And so that's another sort of hesitation that I have. And I guess that's sort of a double concern when we have a lot of these same landlords really fighting both activist groups and the city and at the state to prevent certain tenant protections and that kind of thing. And so if there was a little bit more of a willingness, right, on their part to say, oh no, we're going to be putting our necks on the line to increase tenant protections. We're going to be, sort of in this fight. But then to say, okay, we're going to fight on tenant protections, but then we're going to show up and say, oh great, we'll take this money from you all who are helping these struggling families. That doesn't all the way sit well, and it doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. So again, principally, I think that the program is really important, but I just wanted to make sure that those that my apprehensions are sort of on the record, and that hopefully you guys are taking and really wrestling with these issues as well when it comes to this program and taking that seriously. So thank you.
At this time, then I think Casey has a few more slides, or is it Katie?
Thank you, Mr.
Council President
Chair.
has a question or comment.
And maybe just sort of cap off a lot of the comments we've heard. Not that others can't speak to, but I think a lot of this would potentially be alleviated through more involvement from council members, particularly if there's an interest in project sustainability, as this is the body that approves the annual budget. I do think there's a really extreme need for us to have a better picture of the overall spending on housing and homelessness and how city funds are leveraging those from the county and state, so that we're not always reacting to a particular project that, of course, we all support and care about: homeless children or people who are living in tents at the Wall of Forgotten Natives, and we're reacting to some sort of emergency all the time here without having a bigger picture of how city funds are being leveraged in an effective way with our partners. In a context where, we are looking at 7, 8, 9% levy increases over the coming years just to support our base. That comes from our property taxes, which translates into rising housing costs for cost-burdened households in our city. So when we talk about our concerns about the cost of something, it's because we are hearing from our constituents that housing costs are their number one concern. And this translates directly into property taxes that come in the mail and is a bill that increases people's property taxes. My ears went up when I heard that the partner in accepting this voucher program is the same entity that sued the city over our Section 8 voucher ordinance. So just a question if there is something so different about this particular program than when we tried to expand opportunities for all landlords in the city to accept Section 8. So that lawsuit is ongoing. So I think the concerns that we're raising here, number one, are a consequence of not having a bigger picture understanding of the budgets. Number two, being in a context where, of course, not just in housing, but in many areas of spending, the city is an entity within the county where we don't always have a lot of control over how dollars are spent that are collected from our constituents. Transit is another great example. There's $100 million sales tax revenue collected annually, very little of which is reinvested into the city, into our communities of color and our cost-burdened communities where our constituents are depending on transit. We have beautiful heated stations bringing suburban commuters into downtown while our constituents stand in the rain and snow. So I mean, the overall need here, and I think the frustration from council members about funding is in a bigger context that, of course, you know, it's not fair to ask any one particular staff person who's here to talk about one particular program, but as an ongoing need for us to understand better how our local dollars are being leveraged within the regional context.
Appreciate those comments. I think we're just getting rolling here. Councilmember Schrader, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to go off that same note, how the council president talked about the bigger picture. And I really would phrase it a different way, like what are our goals? I think I share the frustration just because we seem to be, our programs all seem to put out fires and not have an end goal of we are going to create this much housing at this spectrum and be able to house this many people. So we have a date to say that this is when we will be able to house everybody. And I just want to be very clear, I support this program. I think it's a good program. I also think that the city doesn't spend enough on housing. And to be fair, I don't think the county or other people do. If we are serious about giving someone a safe, stable, affordable, and accessible place to live. One thing, I share the concern of Councilmember Ellison, though I do want to see while I do want more money being spent on housing, I'm very critical about how it's spent and want to make sure that we are going deeper. And we're asking the tough questions about would going deeper, 3 years we're going to help so many kids. But I know my kids are going to school for more than 3 years, I hope. And I think that other parents share that. So why not do half of that as many and have it for 6 years? And that's just an example. Right now we have, as far as I know, no goals for creating a certain amount of housing in this city. And that leads us to have this approach where we put out fires, we help those that come up, where the Wall of Forgotten Natives becomes the most important thing while over 800 people are on the housing list. So I think if, in the interest of fairness and the interest of being transparent, we need to have a better approach, and I would hope that we would do that. I know that that's asking a lot of staff, that's very different than what we do now. So what I'm hoping through this project is we start to go in that direction, to start to say, here's how we're going to have a base, here's how we're going to be able to turn the corner, and here's how we're going to be evaluated to be able to use this in our other programs.
Thank you, and I think that could easily be some work of this committee as well. Now there's a little more, you're welcome to respond to any of that you would like, and there's also a little more to the presentation I want you to get to do too.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe just briefly, certainly we'd be happy to, help provide more information on the broader picture of the budget context. And certainly this program is one tool of many that the city is using to try to meet a wide range of housing needs, and it really is something that gets at the lowest income households who currently aren't being served by the system. So I'm happy to work with all of you to get a better picture of those things. And then also just want to acknowledge on the homelessness response, certainly the city and county do work together and are trying to have better communication, but the city helps to fund the county office to end homelessness and has some funding, for example, federal ESG funds that we put toward homelessness. So certainly that's something, to the council president's comments, that we could help provide a better picture of for the committee. I think we already covered the supportive services pretty well, so we're just going to move on to the last few slides here, and also covered this a bit, but here is the budget specific for this program. There's been 1 year of funds approved by the council and Minneapolis Public Housing. It is envisioned as a 3-year pilot. The POLAD funds are committed for 2 years, and as MPHA mentioned, they are paying for 40% of the rental assistance, and then the city's 60% along with some other pieces of the program.
I suspect that we might at some point want to understand how our contribution breaks down in terms of the rental assistance program and case management and evaluation. It looks like there's 3 things there that are included, and Councilmember Goodman might have another question on the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Along the same lines, most budgets have sources and uses, not just sources. So I'm wondering why there isn't a list of uses here so we have a sense of what the money is being spent on. You're doing a presentation to us. You'd think that where the money was going to be spent would be an integral part of it. So why is it not part of the budget?
Thank you. And we are still developing the program at this point, so it's not all set in stone at this point. The vision for the rental assistance is that 40% of the funds come from MPHA and 60% from the city, and then the other components in terms of the services and evaluation are still being developed, and we can certainly follow up with that information once it's
Thank you.
set. And so this has come up a few times. Just wanted to share a little bit more about the evaluation. We are excited because there's already an evaluation ongoing with several researchers from the University of Minnesota. They are evaluating a program at the state level called Homework Starts with Home, which is state-funded rental assistance, a similar purpose for providing rental assistance for families with school-aged kids. So they've already done a lot of work to get a robust evaluation system in place. And we're in discussions with them to be able to just plug right into that and get really strong evaluation of this program, the educational outcomes of the families, and what interventions work well. And so we think that's a unique opportunity with this pilot. We will certainly be measuring things along the way in terms of number of families served, their housing status, which schools they attend, and that information will be readily available along the way. With the more robust evaluation in terms of educational outcomes, that data won't be available just until likely fall of 2020, just because it takes some time to get that educational outcome information. But we think it's an exciting opportunity to be part of this ongoing evaluation. So with that, we'll just conclude with next steps. So our next steps, pending approval by the council, are to enter into a funding agreement with Minneapolis Public Housing Authority to be able to implement the program. I did just want to note that in the RCA, it says we will reimburse MPHA for expenses. We are still in discussions along with finance about whether that would be an upfront payment or reimbursement. So just wanted to make a note that it may come in that form. Part of your materials were a work plan, and that's really just a sort of a calendar outline of the different activities that will be taking place with all the components of this program over the course of the year. Really hoping to get the program up and running and start getting families identified by March. That way we can get some families into the program prior to the end of the school year, because it'll be obviously harder to identify families once the school year is done. And then, continue working with families over the summer and then identify new families once the school year begins. As Kyle mentioned, there will be an RFP issued to secure a service provider, and then there will just be continued efforts to engage landlords to participate in the program. And we'd certainly love to coordinate with council offices as well that have schools in their wards or nearby who may have landlords that would be willing to participate as well. And that's going to be really critical to the success of this program is finding units. So that concludes our program or our presentation. We're happy to take any additional questions.
So I have one more question about the evaluation. And on that slide, it mentions that the university will measure interventions and are most successful and the housing stability and educational outcomes. And in light of some of the conversation, I'm wondering if you think that housing stability might include helping us track what families became stable independent of the assistance. I think that'll be key, and we might actually see this as a better program if it looks like after 2 years most of them are getting some more support. And I don't know if it's in the RFP or anything that we're saying our service providers should also help them be a resource for job training or education of the parents or accessing Social Security or general assistance or whatever other options might be for them to gain more economic independence. But I think that would be key, and I'm kind of assuming the university is also interested in looking at that. But do you know if that's been talked about much so far in terms of the evaluation?
Yes. I believe it has been, and the goal is to sort of capture long-term the family's outcomes. There is both a quantitative and qualitative component to the evaluation, so there will be some of that just, seeing what their housing situation is, incomes, educational outcomes, but then also actually interviewing families to find out how the program worked for them and what things helped them to become more successful. So those will be incorporated.
Because the flow chart process kind of ended with housing secured, and the housing secured really didn't say the housing secured relying on rental assistance forever or not. And I think that up here we're hearing actually, and probably for all of us and for the families, they would actually want more self-sufficient housing, independence and stable housing would be up there. So put that out there. I don't see any other questions. Any final comments on this? Councilmember Ellison.
This might be a question for my colleagues and staff, but as a part of today's action, are we being asked to approve sort of the activation of the $3 million that the city is putting into this program? Is that a part of our action today?
Yes. Activation, I don't know if that's the word, but.
Okay, yeah, right.
Authorizing the funding agreement to go forward, and it hasn't.
Okay. Then I want to voice that I think that Councilmember Goodman, I think, has highlighted some of the, sort of the lack of robustness when it comes to the budget that we're looking at here, and I think that I would want to see that a little bit more detailed out and fleshed out before I felt comfortable taking action on our third item here.
It looks like in the work plan that the final financial agreement they're hoping to have done in February. So there might be a way to bring that back to us beforehand, or there could be that direction for we could call this preliminary authorization or something. Let's think about that. Maybe February is right around the corner, however, so maybe we're really close. Councilmember Goodman.
Thanks. We don't have the full budget. We only have one half of it. Also, is there a detailed work plan beyond this presentation that I must be missing? Was that part of the report?
Part of the report, it was a chart that showed the steps along the way. So it is pretty high level, but that is showing the different components of the program and the months and what activities will be taking place.
That's the total work plan, one page? The one-page thing?
It goes to a second page, but yep, it looks like an Excel spreadsheet, kind of a time frame. It's in the, I don't think it's in paper before us, but it's online.
Okay. Mr. Chair, perhaps we should move this forward without recommendation or postpone it in committee until we get the rest of the budget.
You get to, that's an, we can make motions here. Let's see if there's discussion on that idea to turn that into motion. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I would second that motion. I also just want to voice, I do want to follow up with the director. Maybe it makes sense to do that outside of the committee structure, but we've heard so many times about concerns about staff capacity, particularly when it comes to writing policy that has to do with preventing eviction and displacement from housing in our city. And so I'm concerned about that, just because we have an ordinance that's been underway for, a couple of years here, plus some work that I know other council members have been interested in doing on the policy side to help prevent evictions and displacement from housing citywide. And so I just want to make sure that this, given just all of the feedback we've heard that there isn't enough staff capacity to do that policy work, that we're able to meet this commitment with our existing city staff, and how will that affect the work program that this committee approved that I know we got a little behind on because of all of the work that went into the encampment emergency last year. And so just trying to understand how all of our work will fit in together.
I didn't hear that.
We can do that.
Since you asked, Mr. Chair, Council President Bender, I'm told by staff that the schedule, if we're going to participate in this program, It might be better to forward it without recommendation and see if we can't come to an understanding that works for the council before your meeting next week. If it's your will to see it in committee, then we can make the schedule work to be back here in one cycle with more of a work plan and a more complete budget. So we can make either of those work. We hear the request for additional information and we will produce. The schedule, if we're going to do this work, argues in favor of trying to give you that information soon so that you can vote on it as a full council. But we can make either one work.
Well, I like that solution better myself, and once we're there as a full council, we can always decide that we're not ready then as well. So that gives us a chance, at least a better chance of having it decided sooner. But I see some of my colleagues, Councilmember Schrader.
Sure, well, that was my question, to just see which would, if there was a delay, how much that would impact. My feeling is it seems critical to be able to start this program before the end of school to make sure that students and families are taken care of. So I'm pretty hesitant to push it further than staff's advice.
I appreciate that, and I actually know that our hope is that we'll actually have families housed by March. That's our goal, and I think we do want to see that we can get this rolling out this year to see if it's successful, and there are people who don't have housing now. Councilmember Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I favor the moving it forward without recommendation, and since we kind of had two options, I'll just make that motion.
Okay, appreciate that. So that motion is before us. Councilmember Elson?
Councilmember Wright stole my thunder. I was going to do exactly that. So, yeah, I'm supportive of that motion.
I appreciate that. I actually think there's probably no problem in doing number one, which is receiving and filing the report today. So how about if I move that, we receive and file our report, and then we will move the other two items forward without recommendation. Okay. All those in favor of, well, let's do it this way, since I saw the head noddings, and I think the clerk can track this. That's the motion then, to approve one, receiving and filing this, and then moving forward 2 and 3, approving the work plan and authorizing the funding agreement without recommendation. Is that clear? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That motion carries. And although it doesn't feel like we finished our work for today, I think that's all we're going to accomplish right now for today. And thanks everybody for being here. This meeting is adjourned.